Commander Zathera's crystalline fingers trembled against the holographic display as the impossible readings materialized before her compound eyes. The Vorthack had evolved perfect stability in their extremities over millions of years, yet here she stood, watching her hands shake, like a frightened child's rattle. The quantum scanner's crimson warnings pulsed across the command center of Fortress Prime, casting shadows that danced like specters across the assembled council representatives. "Replay the censored data," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her command of the galaxy's most secure installation. The hologram flickered, then stabilized into a three-dimensional star map, showing the outer perimeter of the Helix Nebula. A single contact moved steadily toward their position, its trajectory unwavering and purposeful. Ambassador Crix of the Helion Confederacy leaned forward, his serpentine neck extending from his environmental suit. "The signature is unmistakable. Hull composition analysis shows refined titanium steel alloys with carbon nanotube reinforcement. Energy readings indicate fusion-based propulsion with quantum entanglement communication arrays." His forked tongue tasted the air nervously. Only one species in recorded history has used that exact technological combination. The word hung unspoken in the sterile air of the command center. Humans, the ghost species, the ones who had simply disappeared 50 years ago, leaving behind empty colonies, abandoned space stations, and 1,000 unanswered questions that haunted the nightmares of every spacefaring civilization. General Voxmar of the Titan hegemony slammed his massive fist against the tactical table, causing several smaller species representatives to scatter. His voice rumbled like distant thunder through his external speakers. "Impossible. We monitored every human settlement. We witnessed their evacuation fleets. They departed for the Galactic Rim and vanished into the void. Their technology was centuries behind ours." Was it? The question came from Dr. Yillith, the Etherian observer whose species existed partially in subspace. Her translucent form shimmered as she accessed archived data through direct neural interface. Human advancement patterns were exponential, not linear. They progressed faster in 50 years than most species achieve in millennia. Perhaps we underestimated their capability for innovation. Zathera studied the approaching signature with growing unease. Fortress Prime had been constructed in the aftermath of humanity's disappearance, designed specifically to prevent their return. The Galactic Council had deemed them too unpredictable, too dangerous to coexist with civilized species. Their capacity for violence was matched only by their disturbing tendency towards self-sacrifice and their incomprehensible loyalty to abstract concepts like freedom and justice. "Distance to contact?" she inquired, though the number was already burned into her consciousness. 17 hours at current velocity," responded Lieutenant Kexani from the sensor station. "The vessel maintains a steady approach vector. No evasive maneuvers. No response to our standard identification requests." The silence stretched until Ambassador Crix broke it with a hissing whisper. "Perhaps they're all dead. A ghost ship, automated systems following ancient programming." No. The contradiction came from Chief Analyst Zorthek, whose species possessed the galaxy's most advanced pattern recognition abilities. His voice carried absolute certainty. "Life signs are present. Multiple biological entities aboard the vessel. They're alive and they're coming home." The implications crashed over the assembled representatives like a tidal wave of liquid fear. Humanity's return had been the subject of countless strategic simulations, each scenario ending in catastrophic destabilization of galactic civilization. Their unpredictable nature made them impossible to categorize as friend or enemy. They were capable of breathtaking compassion and unthinkable brutality, sometimes within the same individual. "Defensive posture recommendations?" Zathera asked, though she already knew the protocol. Fortress Prime's automated systems had been preparing since the first detection. Energy shields powered to maximum capacity. Gravitational lenses focused on the approach vector. Quantum torpedoes armed and targeted. Full defensive deployment is active, reported weapons coordinator next Thursday. However, Commander, our defensive parameters were designed against known species capabilities. Human technological development was always unconventional. Zathera nodded grimly. Unconventional was an understatement. Humans had a disturbing habit of solving problems through methods that violated conventional military doctrine. They employed psychological warfare, sacrificial tactics, and what could only be described as controlled insanity in combat situations. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council," she ordered. "Priority Alpha emergency protocols. Inform them that Contact Event Omega has been initiated." Contact Event Omega, the code phrase that had been established decades ago, but never used. The return of humanity to civilized space. Every major power had contingency plans gathering dust in classified archives, theoretical responses to a theoretical threat that was no longer theoretical. As the communication arrays aligned to broadcast across the galaxy, Zadara found herself wondering if they had built Fortress Prime to keep humans out or keep everyone else in. The approaching vessel continued its steady advance, carry with it 50 years of human evolution adaptation, and whatever they had become in the darkness between the stars. The galaxy was about to rediscover why humanity had been feared enough to build the most secure installation in known space, specifically to prevent their return. Admiral Chen's weather hands moved across the ship's control interface with practiced precision, each gesture carrying the weight of 5 decades in exile. The bridge of the U.S. Persistence hummed with quiet efficiency, its crew of 12 moving through pre-approach protocols with the fluid coordination of a species that has spent 50 years perfecting the art of survival. "Fortress Prime's defensive grid is fully active," reported Navigation Officer Sarah Kim, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Gravitational lenses locked onto our position. Energy readings suggest they could atomize a small moon." Chen allowed himself a thin smile. "They built it well, exactly as we hoped they would." The younger crew members exchanged glances, confusion evident in their expressions. Chief Engineer Marcus Torres spoke first, his accent carrying traces of the Mars colonies they'd been forced to abandon. "Sir, with respect, why are we heading directly toward the most heavily defended position in the galaxy? Our stealth capabilities could bypass their sensors entirely." "Because stealth isn't the point," Jim replied, his eyes fixed on the tactical display, showing Fortress Prime's imposing structure. "They need to see us coming. They need to know we're here." Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the mission xenobiologist, studied the incoming sensor data with fascination rather than fear. Fascinating. 7 different species representatives aboard the station. Vorhack, Helion, Titan, Etherian. They've assembled quite the welcoming committee. Terror has a way of bringing enemies together, observed Lieutenant Commander James Park from the communication station. 50 years ago, half these species were at war with each other. Now they're unified against a common threat. "Us," added Ensign Maria Santos, the youngest member of the crew at barely 30 years old. She had been born in exile, raised on stories of Earth in the home she'd never seen. Chun turned to address his crew, the people who had volunteered for this impossible mission. 50 years ago, our species was scattered across the rim because the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to coexist with civilized races. They weren't entirely wrong. We were violent, unpredictable, and worst of all, we were expanding too fast for their comfort. The main display shifted to show archival footage from their exile. Massive evacuation fleets disappearing into void, Earth cities going dark as the last transports departed, colonies across dozens of worlds abandoned in humanity's greatest exodus. "But exile taught us something," Chin continued. "It taught us who we really are when everything familiar is stripped away. We learned to adapt, to innovate, to survive in environments that would kill any other species. We became something new." Communications Officer Park straightened his priority signals, flooded his console. "Sir, I'm intercepting emergency broadcasts across all galactic frequencies. The Council is mobilizing reserve fleets. 700 warships are converging on this sector. How long until they arrive?" Chen asked calmly. 18 hours. They'll reach us just as we enter Fortress Prime's engagement zone." Dr. Warren looked up from her xenological analysis. "Admiral, the psychological profiles I'm reading suggest these species are genuinely terrified of us. Fear levels are off the charts. They're not just worried about military confrontation. They're afraid we've evolved beyond their comprehension." "Have we?" asked Torres, genuine curiosity in his voice. Chun considered the question carefully. Around him, His crew waited for an answer that would define their species' future relationship with galactic civilization. Through the observation ports, the Helix Nebula's swirling colors painted their faces in alien hues, a reminder how far from home they truly were. "We've evolved," he said finally, "but not in the way they fear. We've learned something that no other species in the galaxy has mastered: how to change without losing ourselves, how to adapt without abandoning our core principles." Ensign Santos, representing the generation born in exile, spoke with quiet intensity. "What are our core principles, sir? I've studied the archives, but 50 years of isolation, what makes us human?" The question hung in the recycled air of the bridge like an oracle's riddle. Chin walked to the forward observation deck, gazing at the distant glow of Fortress Prime's defensive arrays. Behind him, his crew waited for wisdom that would shape their homecoming. "Our core principle is simple," he said, his reflection ghost-like in the reinforced glass. "We don't abandon our own. Not ever. Not for any reason." The crew exchanged meaningful looks as the full implication hit them. This wasn't just about returning to galactic civilization. This was about something else entirely. Communications Officer Park's console erupted in activity. "Sir, incoming transmission from Fortress Prime. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." Chin returned to his command chair, straightening his uniform with deliberate care. "Open channel. All frequencies. I want every species in the galaxy to hear this." The bridge fell silent, except for the subtle hum of quantum processors establishing connection across impossible distances. When the link stabilized, Chen's voice carried the authority of a species that had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earthship Persistence, representing the human coalition in exile. We are not here to conquer, to trade, or to negotiate. We have come to collect what was left behind." He paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy before delivering the statement that would change everything. 50 years ago, when we departed civilized space, not all humans made it to the evacuation fleets. Commanders of Thera's crystalline structure began resonating at a frequency that caused nearby equipment to vibrate ominously as Admiral Chen's words echoed through Fortress Prime's command center. The implication struck the assembled representatives like a physical blow, each species processing the revelation according to their particular evolutionary psychology. Left behind, General Voxmar's mechanical voice carried disbelief mixed with growing dread. "Our records show complete evacuation of all human settlements. Every colony, every outpost, every research station was emptied." Dr. Yelitha's ethereal form flickered as she accessed archive data at superhuman speed, accessing evacuation records, cross-referencing with population censuses. Her translucent face suddenly solidified with horror. "Oh no." Ambassador Crix's serpentine body coiled tighter around his environmental support system. "What have you found, Etherian?" "Prison colonies," Yelith whispered, her voice carrying across dimensional boundaries. "Human criminals, political dissidents, those deemed unfit for evacuation by their own government. Approximately 50,000 individuals scattered across 17 worlds in the galactic quarantine zones." The silence that followed was broken only by the rhythmic pulsing of Fortress Prime's defense grid. Each species representative processes information through their own cultural lens of morality and social structure, but the conclusion was universally chilling. "They've spent 50 years retrieving their own people," Zethera said, her command training overriding personal terror. "Every human left in galactic space." Lieutenant Kexani's sensor station erupted in alerts. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the sector, multiple contacts emerging from quantum fold space." The tactical display exploded with contacts. Not 700 approaching warships, but something infinitely more disturbing. Human vessels, dozens of them, materializing from impossible hiding places throughout the nebula. Each ship carried the same titanium steel hull signature as the Persistence, but these were larger, more advanced, clearly designed for purposes beyond simple retrieval. "They've been here all along," Chief Analyst Zorthek observed, his pattern recognition abilities overwhelmed by the implications. "Watching us, learning from us, adapting." Admiral Chen's transmission continued across all frequencies. The 50,000 humans you left behind were not abandoned by their species. They were temporarily isolated while we prepared for their recovery. Some were rescued within months. Others took decades to locate. The last group was extracted just 3 years ago from a failed colony in the Magellan Drift. General Voxmar accessed tactical data with growing alarm. These vessel configurations, they're not following any known military doctrine. Propulsion systems I don't recognize. Weapon signatures that don't match our databases. Because they developed in isolation, Dr. Warren's voice joined the transmission from the Persistence. 50 years of evolution without external influence. We become something new while remaining fundamentally human. Ambassador Crix tasted the air nervously. What do you want from us? Reparations? Territory? Revenge for the exile? The pause before Admiral Chen's response lasted exactly 17 seconds, long enough for every species to contemplate their worst fears about human intentions. We want nothing from you, Chen said finally. Our business with galactic civilization concluded 50 years ago. We're here to deliver a message. Commander Zethera felt her crystalline structure stabilize as relief flooded through her system. State your message. Humanity is departing known space permanently. We've established colonies beyond the galactic rim, outside your sphere of influence. This will be our final contact with your civilizations. The representatives exchanged confused glances. This wasn't any scenario their strategic planners had anticipated. Retreat? Permanent exile? It seemed almost reasonable. But Dr. Yilitha's form was flickering with agitation. Admiral Chen, your fleet composition suggests capabilities far beyond what would be necessary for simple evacuation or colonization. Why do you need warships if you're merely departing? Because, Chen replied, his voice carrying new edges of steel, we're not just leaving. We're taking something with us. The tactical display shifted to show Fortress Prime itself, its massive structure outlined in targeting algorithms. But the human ships weren't positioning for attack. They were surrounding something else entirely. Impossible! Zethera breathed as the truth became clear. At the heart of the nebula, hidden within Fortress Prime's protective embrace, lay the Galactic Archive, the repository of all known species scientific knowledge, cultural heritage, and technological advancement. Every civilization contributed to it, and every civilization depended on its preservation for their continued development. You can't. General Voxmar's voice carried desperation. The archive belongs to all species. It represents millions of years of collective advancement. It represents the knowledge that was denied to humanity during our exile. Admiral Chen corrected. The medical techniques that could have saved lives in our outer colonies. The agricultural science that could have prevented famines on marginal worlds. The stellar cartography that could have guided us to better refuges. Chief Engineer Torres's voice joined the transmission. We spent 50 years developing technologies from first principles while you sat on solutions to problems that killed thousands of our people. The archive contains human contributions too, research and discoveries our species made before the exile. Lieutenant Commander Park added, every human child born in exile grew up knowing that somewhere in the galaxy was a library containing the cure for their genetic diseases, the solution to their environmental problems, the knowledge that could have given them better lives. The human fleet continued a precise maneuvering around Fortress Prime, not attacking, but clearly demonstrating capability that made the station's defenses seem primitive by comparison. The archive is our inheritance, Admiral Chen said. We're taking it with us beyond the rim, where it will serve the species that actually needs it. Dr. Yilitha's form solidified with desperate urgency. Admiral, without the archive, galactic civilization will stagnate. Scientific progress will slow to a crawl. Medical advancement will virtually cease. Then you'll learn what humanity learned in exile, Chen replied. You'll innovate or die. The Galactic Archive hung suspended in the nebula's heart, like a crystalline monument to collective knowledge, a structure 3 kilometers long and perfectly spherical, its surface covered in quantum storage matrices that house the accumulated wisdom of 47 species across 12 million years of civilization. Inside its protective barriers lay the cure for every known disease, the solution to every engineering problem, the answer to scientific questions that most species hadn't even learned to ask yet. Admiral Chin stood before the observation deck aboard the Persistence, watching his fleet's precise choreography around the archive with the satisfaction of a plan 5 decades in the making. Each human vessel moved with purpose, their advanced propulsion systems allowing maneuvers that violated several established principles of physics. "Sir," reported Chief Engineer Torres, "the extraction arrays are in position. We can begin quantum translocation in 12 minutes. Dr. Warren monitored the increasingly frantic communications from Fortress Prime's command center. "They're offering us territorial concessions, Admiral. The Vorthack are willing to cede 3 entire systems. The Helion Confederacy is offering a formal alliance." "Too late," Chin replied simply. 50 years too late. On Fortress Prime, Commander Zathera was discovering the limitations of the galaxy's most secure defense system. Her weapons could atomize planets. Her shields could withstand supernova blasts. But she had no protocols for preventing someone from simply taking the things she was supposed to protect. "Can we move the archive?" she asked desperately. Chief Analyst Zorthek's pattern recognition systems were overloaded with tactical data. "Negative. The archive's quantum storage requires absolute positional stability. Any attempt to relocate, it would result in complete data loss." General Voxmar slammed his fist against the tactical display again, cracking the holographic projectors. "Then we fight. 700 warships will arrive in 6 hours. We hold until they get here." "With what?" Ambassador Crix hissed. "Their shields are absorbing our targeting scanners. Our weapons can't lock onto them." Dr. Yillith flickered between dimensions as she processed the tactical situation. "Their technology isn't just advanced. It's fundamentally different. They're using principles we don't understand." The truth was more disturbing than any of them realized. Humanity hadn't just developed new technology during their exile. They had developed new approaches to understanding reality itself. Forced to survive without the archive's accumulated knowledge, they had questioned assumptions that other species accepted as universal constants. Lieutenant Commander Park's voice echoed to the command center. "Commander Zadara, you're wondering how we develop capabilities that surpass your understanding. The answer is simple. We had to. When you have no reference material, no established scientific literature, no conventional wisdom to guide you," added Dr. Warren, "you're forced to observe the universe directly and draw your own conclusions. Sometimes those conclusions are wrong. Sometimes they're revolutionary." Chief Engineer Torres joined the explanation. "We discovered that quantum mechanics works differently in the void between galaxies. We learned to manipulate gravitational fields by studying neutron star formations. We developed new materials by experimenting with matter that had never encountered a magnetic field." Admiral Chen's voice carried quiet pride. "Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our military might. It was our ability to adapt when everything we thought we knew turned out to be wrong." The human fleet's extraction arrays began emitting harmonious frequencies that caused the archive protective barriers to resonate sympathetically. Not an attack, but a sophisticated unlocking mechanism that treated the barriers as a puzzle rather than an obstacle. "How?" Commander Zathera demanded. The archive's defenses were designed by the greatest minds of 47 species, working in collaboration. 46 species, corrected Admiral Chun. Humanity was excluded from the design process. That exclusion was your mistake. The truth struck the assembled representatives like a physical blow. The archive's security had been designed with every known species psychology and capabilities in mind, except humanity's. The very exile that was meant to protect galactic civilization had created a blind spot in their most crucial defense. Ensign Santos, representing the generation born in exile, added her voice to the transmission. "My parents died in a plague outbreak that could have been prevented with information from the archive. My brother was killed in a structural collapse that wouldn't have happened if we'd had access to proper engineering data. Thousands of humans died because you decided we were too dangerous to share knowledge with. But we're not taking the archive for revenge," Admiral Chin continued. "We're taking it because we've learned something that you haven't. Knowledge belongs to whoever needs it most." The extraction process reached critical phase as quantum fields began lifting the archive from its protective housing. The massive structure rose slowly, its surface rippling with energy patterns that painted the nebula in impossible colors. "Where will you take it?" Dr. Yillith asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her species' terror. "Beyond the galactic rim," Admiral Chen replied, "to colonies where children die from diseases you cured millennia ago, where engineers struggle with problems you solved before their species achieved spaceflight, where scientists ask questions that your archive has already answered." Commander Zadera made one final attempt at negotiation. "Admiral, the archive represents collective knowledge. It belongs to all species equally." "Does it?" Chen's voice carried steel, wrapped in disappointment. "When humanity faced extinction events during exile, did the archive's knowledge flow freely to save lives? When our children were born with genetic defects because we lacked access to medical databases, did collective ownership mean anything? The archive cleared Fortress Prime's protective embrace and began its journey toward a human fleet's formation. Around it, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched helplessly as their collective inheritance departed forever. "The galaxy will learn to survive without the archive," Admiral Chen said, "just as humanity learned to survive without the galaxy." But he wasn't finished. The final twist that would reshape galactic civilization was yet to come. The archive hung suspended between human vessels like a pearl in an oyster shell of advanced technology, its quantum storage matrices pulsing with the accumulated knowledge of galactic civilization. Admiral Chen watched the extraction with satisfaction, but his expression carried something that made his crew exchange worried glances, the look of a man who had saved the hardest part for last. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Kim, "quantum translocation is complete. The archive is secure within our formation. We can depart for the rim whenever you're ready." Chen nodded, but didn't give the departure order. Instead, he activated ship-wide communications to address not just his crew, but every human vessel in the fleet and every listening post throughout galactic space. 50 years ago, he began, his voice carrying the weight of exile and return, galactic civilization made a decision about humanity. They decided we were too unpredictable, too violent, too dangerous to coexist with evolved species. They gave us a choice: conform to their standards of civilization or leave forever. On Fortress Prime, Commander Zadera felt her crystalline structure beginning to resonate again as she sensed something terrible approaching. The human fleet maintained a protective formation around the archive, but they weren't moving toward the galactic rim as promised. "We chose exile," Chen continued, "because we understood something that you didn't. Conformity isn't evolution, it's extinction. The galaxy you build is stable, peaceful, and slowly dying." Dr. Yillith accessed demographic data at quantum speed, her ethereal form flickering with growing comprehension. Population growth rates, declining across all species. Scientific advancement, plateauing for the last 3 centuries. Innovation indices, falling steadily since humanity left, finished Chun, his voice reaching every corner of civilized space. "You removed the chaos factor from your equation and achieved perfect stability. No wars, no conflicts, no unpredictable elements to disturb your peaceful coexistence." Chief Engineer Torres joined the transmission. "But evolution requires pressure. Growth requires challenges. Progress requires someone willing to break the rules and try something different." The human fleet began to move, but not toward the galactic rim as expected. Instead, they positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the nebula, their advanced vessels forming a complex geometric pattern around Fortress Prime and its increasingly panicked defenders. "You're not leaving," Commander Zadera realized, her voice carrying despair. "We are," Admiral Chen confirmed, "but not the way you expected." Lieutenant Commander Park explained. "The archive contains 47 species contributions to collective knowledge. 46 of those contributions represent refinements of existing principles, improvements on established theories, incremental advances within accepted paradigms." Dr. Warren added, "Only one species' contributions represent fundamental breaks with established thinking, revolutionary approaches that challenge basic assumptions about reality. Human contributions, whispered Dr. Yilith, understanding dawning in her multidimensional consciousness. Exactly, Chen confirmed, and we're taking those contributions with us. The true scope of humanity's plan became clear as quantum processors aboard the human vessels began extracting specific data from the archive, not stealing the entire repository, but surgically removing every human innovation, every human discovery, every human insight that had contributed to galactic advancement. Medical techniques that broke the barrier between organic and mechanical healing, listed Dr. Warren. Agricultural methods that allowed farming in previously impossible environments. Propulsion theories that enabled faster-than-light travel. Artificial intelligence principles that created truly conscious machines. General Voxmar's mechanical voice carried new understanding of galactic civilization's precarious position. Without human innovations, our medical technology regresses 5,000 years. Our agricultural capacity drops by 60%. Our space travel becomes limited to sublight speeds. But that's impossible, Ambassador Crix protested. Those technologies were developed by our best scientists. Built on human foundations, Chief Engineer Torres corrected. Your species refined our innovations, improved our designs, perfected our crude prototypes. But the fundamental breakthroughs, the moments when someone said, "What if we tried something completely different?" Those came from human minds. The extraction reached its final phase as human vessels prepared to depart, taking with them not just a physical archive, but something far more valuable, the spark of unpredictable innovation that had driven galactic advancement for millennia. Why? Commander Zadora asked, her question carrying the desperation of species facing an uncertain future. Why not just leave us in peace? Admiral Chen's response carried 50 years of accumulated wisdom and sorrow. Because peace without growth is death. Stability without challenge is stagnation. You exiled humanity to preserve your comfortable civilization, but comfortable civilizations don't survive. The human fleet began its final maneuver, vessels disappearing into quantum-fold space one by one, taking their revolutionary knowledge toward colonies beyond the galactic rim, where children had learned to question everything and adults had never forgotten how to adapt. In 50 years, Chen said as his own ship prepared for departure, when your populations are declining and your technologies are failing, when you face challenges that require innovation instead of incremental improvement, you'll understand why evolution needs chaos agents. Ensign Santos, speaking for the generation that would inherit humanity's new home among distant stars, delivered the final message. We're not your enemies. We never were. We're your necessary chaos, your essential unpredictability, your reminder that survival requires constant change. You exiled us to save your civilization. The Persistence began its transition to fold space, Admiral Chen's last words echoing across the galaxy. Now we'll save it from a distance, by showing you what you can become if you remember how to evolve. As the human fleet vanished beyond the galactic rim, carrying with them the archive and the revolutionary spark that had driven civilization's advancement, the assembled species were left to contemplate a universe suddenly much larger and more challenging than their comfortable corner of it. In the expanding silence of their wake, galactic civilization faced a choice their peaceful coexistence had never prepared them for. Learn to innovate again, or slowly fade into the comfortable darkness of evolutionary dead ends. The galaxy's most secure system had detected a human hull signature, and in trying to stop them, had discovered something far more disturbing than invasion or conquest, the realization that they needed what they had exiled more than humanity had ever needed them. Chat Control Sonnet 4.